If you look at Erickson's research around mastery, and, you know, like we've taken the 10,000 hours message and we've got a lot of that wrong.
Yeah.
He wasn't just talking about it's the amount of practice, it's the type of practice. And when we're practicing, are we being intentional? And we're thinking like, okay, here's what my focus is for this next thing I want to do. I want to focus on this element of my leadership. And if you think about those three phases, what they really do is the reflect makes us self-aware. So what am I carrying for what I've just done? Am I angry? Am I frustrated? Am I resentful about a previous interaction?
It's like a self-diagnostic.
What's that?
It's like a self-diagnostic.
Yeah, totally. It's that check-in with ourselves. The second part is, can I be in this moment? Because so often we're future pacing, we're thinking about what we've got to do at 4:00 or what we've got to do tomorrow. And then that reset phase is exactly what you said. Here's my intention. Here's what I want to achieve. Here's what I want to focus on. So it really helps us be aware, calm, and intentional. But also, there was something else you said before about, what was it? You made a really great point before, and I was going to build on it.
So I guess another big question that I have that I kind of want to dive into this, because obviously you've made this your life's research, right?
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm really curious about is like, what is the actual science behind each one of these steps? And, you know, obviously there is quite a bit of science around like meditation, and there's quite a bit of science about like visualization and all these things. They've ran these studies. I'm curious to hear more about what the specific science is behind each of the different steps of your third space.
Yeah, actually, I've just remembered what I was going to say.
Perfect.
And that is that so often during the day we get into autopilot. And we just kind of, as you talked about, we just, from muscle memory, we just do things over and over, or we're not even thinking about, we're so busy and consumed by tasks. So what the third space does is stops that I've just got into a routine and I'm not really thinking about performance here. I've just got to get through this meeting. In terms of the science, I mean, we kind of touched on it, that ability of, can I be self-aware? And you look at, if we talk about leadership for a moment, if you look at any piece of good research on leadership, what they talk about is self-awareness is the bedrock of good leadership. Can I be aware of what's happening? Can I articulate the emotion I have? Can I identify my thoughts? And it sounds just
very basic.
Yeah, but so many people can't do it. Like so many people I work with, I ask them what emotion they have, and it's kind of either good, bad, angry. Their emotional vocabulary is really, really poor. So they can't even walk away from a meeting and go, I'm mad. Oh, actually, no, I'm not. Actually, I'm hurt, or I feel judged, or I feel taken for granted. So the greater that self-awareness, just the ability to alter our behavior or respond more appropriately is far greater. I mean, in terms of the second phase, that mindfulness, that ability to be present, I mean, there's so much data and it talks about how incredibly important that is. And then the last phase about, intention, what do I want to achieve, having clarity in this meeting, here's my number one focus. Those three things are so universal, and that's the science behind them. And there's so much data that reinforces all three of those things.
Yeah. The thing that pops into my mind, the word, of the neurochemical is cortisol, right? When you're at work, you're constantly getting all these stressors that are pulling at you and are really triggering, kind of like this either fight or flight response. You might be talking to an angry customer on the phone, or you might be dealing with like not getting a sale, or, dealing with difficult people or a difficult situation. And so really, I think that a big part of it is like how to deal with stress. So being able to utilize a system and have a framework that's pre-established that that you can fall to, and that the more you practice, the better you get at and you can use more quickly. Really a good system to be able to implement so that you can recover from these stressful bouts. Because I mean, the evidence is also clear that chronic stress is terrible for you. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to check that wherever you can to ensure that the stress doesn't become chronic, it's an acute situation and you're able to return back to baseline as quickly as possible. I think that not enough can be said about that.
Just hit so many great points in that statement there's an element of micro recovery to it as well. Like you think about that rest phase. That rest phase might be 3 seconds, or it could be 5 minutes where I'm calming myself. And particularly if the previous interaction was a really stressful one, it's about, well, okay, I've just had a really, challenging conversation with a client who's really upset. How do I calm myself so I don't take that into the next interaction? So there is a micro recovery piece, and there's a lot of good data. Even Microsoft did some amazing research looking at people working virtually, and if they didn't have breaks between virtual meetings, how overwhelmed the brain became. But even if they had like a 4-minute break where they were practicing being calm, the brain's capacity and the brain's level of stress dropped hugely. So, I mean, I think that micro rest part, and you talked about, what'd you call it earlier before we started?
Non-sleep deep rest. Yeah. So NSDR, it's a huge thing that Huberman does.
Can transform our day. So, and you also touched on a really great piece that, and this is what our data shows, is this is skill-based. Like you can get better at it, and you get better at it really quickly. And one trial we did is we got 800 business leaders, so they're all leading teams, to practice those 3 steps between work and home. Now, we measured a lot of things, but mood in the home was one of them. So how happy was their home? And what we saw is over a month, we saw a 43% improvement in mood in the home.
Wow.
Like their homes got happier by 43%. What we learn is that we get better at this really quickly, and the impact of this is incredibly deep.
That's awesome. To touch on another point of this, it seems like that these micro breaks, these micro resets, a lot of people think that growth happens in the grind, that growth happens, when you're stressed. It's like, well, you can't grow unless you're doing something really hard. But, if we look at, and specifically with exercise, but I think this is true in almost every other category as well, is this idea of like, growth happens when you're resting, not when you're being stressed. That's the stimulus that causes you to be able to grow. But where the actual growth happens is when you actually rest. And so for this reason, Andrew Huberman, one of the big recommendations he makes when after a workout, once you're done with your workout, he's like, try ending that workout with just like a 5 or 10 minute non-sleep deep rest or meditation or just laying on the ground and working on your breathing. Because he's like, if you do that, you're going from this high level of stress and you're immediately basically inducing your body to go into a recovery state very quickly. And if you do that, you're able to essentially get to your gains, take the initial trauma or stress that you need to go through to stimulate those gains, but then you're able to go right away into the state of recovery instead of letting that stress drag out and become more chronic and something that, your body has a harder time recovering from.
Yeah. And I think, I think it was Amelia and Emily Nagoski talked about looking at stress like it's a tunnel. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And what they talk about is we rarely complete that stress cycle. Like we rarely leave the tunnel. And you described it earlier as we get in this chronic state of stress. And one of the things about the third space is if we take that time to kind of reflect on what we've done, to calm ourselves, think about what we're doing next, it helps us complete that stress cycle and it helps us come out of that tunnel. And it's just such a really important concept, whether it's Huberman's advice of, well, how do I transition out of my workout? And his idea of doing that deep rest is that rest phase of the third space. Like, okay, I've reflected on my workout, what was great about it, how am I calming myself? All right, now I'm going off to my next thing. How do I prepare myself? So there's huge amounts of parallels. And I mean, what we're seeing in the data and our research is, similar patterns, similar findings that show that this ability to transition is such an important one.